Hello and welcome to Labour Lens. I am Sharon Ijason. On this week edition of the program, we'll be focusing on organized businesses and some of the challenges they are faced with as some international organizations announce their exits from the country.
The National Economic Council has continued to roll out more interventions that will cushion the impact of the withdrawal of subsidy payments. Already there is a disruption to the national life with the rising inflation that has caused a spike in prices of food items, transport and other commodities. The federal government has approved 5 billion naira for each state and trucks of food items and other commodities as a stopgap to push back the current economic hardship.
52% of this money is given to states as grants, while 48% of the 5 billion naira is to be paid back on an installment basis within a period of 2 years, 20 months.
The MSME credit, billions and tens of billions that are being pumped into the market, even under this palliative, as it were. MSME receiving about 75 billion. You have the 100 billion agri credit.
The National Economic Council disclosed that the federal government is yet to provide succor to households and communities impacted by the devastating floods of 2022. This is because some governors of the affected states are yet to submit a comprehensive report on the loss incurred.
Right Honorable Aminu Waziri Tambuwal drew the attention of the Council to the devastating effect.
As the implementation of resolutions reached by the country's highest economic body continues across the country, NEC is also getting presentations and inputs from various stakeholders on how to grow the economy and improve the quality of living.
Objectives of microeconomic stability to be one, to have a high and stable economy, to have low inflation, to reduce unemployment.
Border communities between Nigeria and Niger Republic will also get special attention as they grapple with the biting effects of the border closure and the influx of refugees due to sanctions imposed by ECOWAS on the landlocked West African country.
The Haddock Committee investigating alleged job racketeering and gross abuse of government's payment system is still very much in session. The 24 persons who petitioned the committee said they paid various amounts of money to Haruna Kolo on the promise they would get jobs and were invited to testify. But on this day, only 14 of them made appearances.
We are here to get facts from you. We are not prosecuting agencies, and we are not going to take anybody to court now, unless if the need arise recommending to your parent agency to do that.
One after the other, the testifiers gave account of their experience while trying to secure jobs. They confirmed to have made payments into bank accounts belonging to Haruna Kolo, the former IBPI's desk officer. Amosi Jalo and Musa Ibrahim are two of the job racketeering victims. They confessed to receiving salaries without placements.
We did our IPPS on 14 October 2021. I started receiving my salary the next month in November. Based on that, I have confidence. Kolo told me to look for additional people. He equally told me that there will be another recruitment.
I provided pictures that are also on your table of that same person, Abdullahi Ibrahim Adara, with the chairman. And on several occasions, they have been together. We have seen them, we have a lot of pictures, and I am sure that with his phone number and account number.
The committee is determined to unmask every grey area and ensure justice is not only served, but seen to have been served.
Them fair hearing. While we write to banks regarding to account statement of Abdullahi, we'll equally invite him to come here briefly for 10 minutes and tell us what he knows about the various slots that we have complained from over 9 persons regarding to him. So we may not have much question to ask you, but I think it will be proper whenever we invite Abdullahi to come here. You equally need to be here. The commissioner from Nasarawa needs to equally be here.
The HADA committee is still spreading its tentacles and has again reassured the nation of its commitment to be thorough and a desire to change the narrative at the end of its assignment.
And this is due to the malaise in the economy, monetary economy, micro and macro policies that we put in place that made the companies not to be able to stand and survive all the inconsistent and constantly changing policies. I am not a supporter of the present government, but I must give it to them that what they have done is they've decided to bite the bullet almost immediately without waiting for some time. And in biting the bullet, yes, some people will feel the pains. Some people will feel the pain, and some would work from the game. But I know that if we allow some of these policies to work very well, if they're able to stabilize the naira to the dollar at a certain rate, and that would help. Help with planning and also allow a new set of investors to come in. What we had before was some favored ones getting at the official rate while every other person went to the streets to get dollar. You see they were subsidizing travel for those who could afford expensive travel. They were subsidizing education for those who could send their children abroad. They were subsidizing health for those who could afford to go to health. I think the new policy is bringing everybody to ground zero. So we are now fighting for the common interest of the nation to have a very strong naira and also save ourselves from the consistent subsidy we've been paying over the years, which has made the country to be very, very broke.
Let's know the strengths, or when I mean strengths, in terms of what they are what they are producing. The kind of companies that are leaving, because at the end of the day, you don't want sensitive and sensitive companies to leave, because if such companies leave, it means you are going to suffer. So the government would want to ensure. That's why there are interventions, and these are the time for interventions. There are some sensitive aspects of the economy that should be considered, that should get these interventions, because at the end of the day, like I said, some services are just too essential for you to ignore. But other than that, if the services are not that essential, everybody, it's free. It's a free world. Companies can decide to leave, why companies can decide to come. But for the fact that it's because as we see, there are a lot of the population side of this country is large, is quite a number. Excuse me. So there are a lot of companies springing up every day. So by the end of the day, like I said, let's ensure that interventions are made available for the sensitive and essential companies.
On the profile interview segment this week, I'll be speaking with the Director General of the Nigeria Employers Consultative Association. He brought us up to speed on how organized private businesses are faring, the challenges they are faced with, and possible solutions which different stakeholders can put in place to ensure that businesses thrive. It's good to have you on the program.
Good evening. Thank you for having us.
First time we'll be having a conversation after the ILO conference. Well, a lot is happening in the Nigerian space, especially for organized businesses and also for governments and workers as well. We've experienced a series of protests. But for the organized private sector, especially the employers' side, which you represent, what has been the feedback, especially with the new development of businesses announcing they're shutting down production and exiting the country? What does this tell us
Well, it's a sad development that we can perceive it coming. I don't want to say we saw it coming, because the parameters that should give you an inkling of whether investors will come in or whether businesses will leave, those parameters are not very positive. From the twilight of the last administration, we had these issues of issue of taxes, issue of forex, the exchange rate. These were not very rosy. Businesses were basically surviving on the tenterhooks. And we came to the new administration. Yeah, we got some reliefs. The fiscal monetary policy measures, excise duty tax was suspended. Though we have called for a total reversal of that policy. Government made certain definitive comments or statements, which we are also expecting implementation as quickly as possible. For those that are leaving, a business doesn't take the decision to leave in a day. They don't take decisions to leave in 3 months. It must have been an accumulation of so many factors that are not making doing business interesting. And those factors are varied. They are multidimensional. It can be regulatory environment if it's not good enough. It might be, sometimes it's competition. Sometimes it might even be the business fault of not reinventing itself in the face of the challenges that
or current realities.
Or current reality. So, but predominantly for us in this environment, I think it's more of the regulatory environment. I must confess to you, things has not been very, very, very rosy. It takes somebody with grit, somebody with a high level of resilience to operate a business in this environment. And the factors are all there to see, from legislative incursion to business. We had an issue a few days ago where the National Assembly, some committees in the National Assembly, keep writing organized businesses, inviting MDs for one investigative hearing or the other, purportedly under Section 88 and 89. We've been on this for many years, for God's sake, and we approached the court for interpretation of Section 88 and 89. If my operation is already epileptic, capacity utilization is already less than 50%, tending towards 30, 35%. What I don't need is another bottleneck that will slow down the growth of my business. Add that to the multiplicity of taxes that the government is trying to deal with. So all those issues will influence, do I keep my capital here? Or I just close shop and move to the neighboring country to go and produce, while I leverage on the large market of Nigeria to come and sell. So as I move out, the consequences are wide and varied. And most legislators or most regulators, they don't see these consequences.
What policies do you actually think needs to be put in place to actually cushion the effects of more businesses winding down? For example, the past administration closed the borders. How did that policy affect the country? Do you think there are other policies that needs to be checked to ensure that businesses thrive, especially those that are in the manufacturing sector?
Closing border, we were really against closing borders, because initially you must define the reason why you're closing borders. Now, if you're closing border, if you're strategically closing border because you want us to buy made in Nigerian goods, beautiful, then there'll be other consequential policies or regulations around it that will make the Nigerian goods, make those importations unattractive. Probably you increase the tariff on those products. And then you strengthen customs to be able to man the borders. And once you do that, then you also make importation unattractive by building the necessary infrastructure for the local manufacturers to leverage on. If you close the border and we still have power issues, we still have regulators seeing businesses as cash cows, or being vexatious that the business is growing, then invariably increases the cost of doing business, which will make importation cheaper, because probably the competitor outside has power, is cheap, is not paying too much of tax, the environment is liberal for him, the environment is pro-growth. So he will still produce at a cheaper price. So those, the unscrupulous Nigerians, that I'll call it, will find it easy to bring in those goods through the routes that you probably don't know. And then they come to the Nigerian market, and those goods will still be cheaper than the made in Nigerian goods. So the average Nigerian whose purchasing power has been bastardized by inflation, we rather look at those alternatives and look, do I buy the local products? Should I go with patriotism and lose more money, or should I just close my eyes and take the survival option? And the survival option is, let me buy the ones that will keep more money in my pocket. So government need to create an environment. We should remain, I say, create an environment within the context of engagement with regulators. Let the parameters for judging a regulator, whether customs, whether FRS, whatever the regulator is, let the parameter for judging their success rate is how many businesses they promote, their policies. Is the policies punitive, or does the policies encourage businesses to grow, encourage businesses to comply with laws? We also believe personally, look, sometimes you don't legislate compliance. If you legislate compliance, you are also compelled to create an agency that will enforce compliance. And in creating agencies that will enforce compliance, you also have a pool of lawyers that will also take those not complying to court. So the money that you've not collected, you're also losing, or the money you probably collect by legislation, you're also losing it through leakages of other agencies you've created to enforce. So if you make compliance attractive for all businesses, I can tell you that our member companies we preach responsible enterprises, and compliance is not really a burden for them. So let's create an environment that makes an average Nigerian willing and happy to pay tax. So I think the government need to look at the issues holistically, rather than we pick one issue, we deal with it. We'll have solved this problem, but we'll have, from the back door, create other issues for ourselves.
Okay, most recently we've experienced price changes in PMS due to the removal of fuel subsidy.
Yeah.
We all have our personal experiences. What has been the feedback from organized private sector? How are they reacting to this? There may be palliatives for businesses so that they can thrive. Let me take it from there.
For us, it has been a double-edged sword. You know, we canvassed for the removal of fuel subsidy. And what we had expected that when government was removing the fuel subsidy, a complementary palliative would have been announced also to say we are taking this from Nigerians, but we are creating this to cushion the effect. Now that was not done, then subsidy was removed. Naturally, we know the consequences. You know, it affects the transportation, affects food prices. You know, the value chain basically responded to price change. The president has announced a series of interventions for businesses. While we commend those interventions, we've also requested that timely implementation will be very necessary. We're happy that the Senate has probably finished the screening of ministers, because to implement, you need certain structures. You need the Ministry of Trade and Investment to manage the issue of palliative for the manufacturing industry. If we are buying 3,000 buses, you need the Ministry of Transport to play a role in that context. You need the Minister of Finance to coordinate the distribution of those funds. So if those structures are not there, then it makes implementation a bit cumbersome or very difficult to do. But we want government to proactively continue the engagement, whatever intervention they want to give, Let them implement now so that those we are trying to save, they're not dead before oxygen will get to them.
Do you know that some employers of labor are taking that step towards probably reviewing salaries for their workers, while some cannot probably afford it? Absolutely. What has been the impact so far?
We advise members that within the context of a limitation, because you cannot spend the money you don't have. So within the context of their limitation, within the context of their reality, we know some have reviewed allowances, as you said. Some have stepped up the issue of hybrid work to reduce the transportation expenses of their staff. But all those interventions, they also feed into the cost of doing business. So for an average business, it's a double-edged sword. Yes, the president commended organized businesses for what we've been doing, but I can tell you, we are doing all those things in tears. Because they are necessary for us to do, to support employees, and also you have to keep the business running. So it's not been very convenient, but I said I commend the resilience and doggedness of an average Nigerian businessman, because it's not been easy. We just hope things will turn the tide as quickly as possible, and then the prosperity that was promised, we all start to enjoy it.
Moving on to the issue of unemployment, which seems to be the order of the day. What has NECA done to actually reduce the number of unemployed youths? I remember very clearly that there was the job fair recently. Yep. What has been the feedback? How many were you able to ingest into the system?
Our employability scheme, is basically to address the issue of unemployment, and we do that through strategic skilling. People say there's no job in this country, but we also know there are jobs. But there's a big gap within the context of the skills available and the jobs that are also available. And what we've done is to try and bridge the gap. We did the first job fair in Abuja, focusing on IT skills. But there's a massive opportunity in the IT space. And also the ILO is also focusing on developing IT skills and supporting organized businesses. So we ran that in Abuja with quite commendable, and a lot of the youths actually are those that are not taken up through internship. They also some are also they've started their own business because of the kind of skill they learned, IT skills, and many of them are also employed. Maybe we didn't achieve 100% offtake, because even the businesses that should take them is also facing one or two challenges. We also did the job fair in Lagos with Prince Trust International, a trust owned by King Charles of England. That was in July. It was focused on renewable energy, and we can say boldly that over 100 graduates that went through the training on renewable energy, most of them are almost taken off the market by organizations that came in. And also, very instructive, the NECA ITF Technical Skill Development Project that is also making wave, creating entrepreneurs of Nigerian youths, and also making definitive impact in the context of our national development. That project needs support.
So what type of partnership are you actually looking out for?
Now, technical skill development is not cheap. The NECA ITF platform, the NECA ITF Technical Development Project, is a model that we have even taken out of this country. And everywhere that it has gone, countries are modeling that platform. And it needs a lot of funds to drive. So partners that can buy starter packs for trainees. Somebody have learned mechatronics, somebody have learned furniture making, somebody have learned other technical skills. When they finish, sometimes it's helpful when you get them starter packs, a mini or quasi equipment that can make them to start their own business. And once they're able to start, it's most likely that a graduate that is good in furnishing, good in electronic, we probably employ 1 or 2 persons to join him or her in running the business or as workers. So partners that can support with funding, partners that can support with starter packs in whatever context. It might be laptop for those that have finished those core IT skills, so that they can run their consulting on their own, and partners that also can play a role in off-taking many of those graduates.
But the question again will be that to have a robust conversation, we know that organized private sector is supposed to be part of this conversation. Would you say that so far the technical committees that have been set up to actually look at this in these several issues, were you carried along?
Now there is what we call bipartisan and tripartisan. Within the context of government engaging labor, as far as we are concerned, they are free to engage. Government is an employer, is engaging labor, which are its employees, in a bipartisan negotiation with the view of salary augmentation or salary award, as the wage award or wage adjustment, as they call it, which is beautiful. We don't have any problem with that. It's within the right of labor. During COVID, we had a bipartisan engagement with labor, where we signed an MOU that, look, within the context of this challenge, employers will not sack workers except it becomes absolutely necessary. That also was a bipartisan agreement. We didn't call government into it. So government can also assign an agreement with employers on several issues without calling labor. So we don't have problem with that. But the challenge we have is in mixing up the issue of national minimum wage negotiation with wage adjustment. For the national minimum wage negotiation, it has to be a tripartite agreement in line with ILO Convention 131, which specifies how it should be done. That way, we reduce the pressure on ourselves, and we reduce ourselves washing our dirty line in the global community.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having us.
And that's all we can take on today's edition of the program. Join us next week for a fresh edition of the show. I am Sharon Ijason. Thanks for watching, and remember that labor creates wealth.